Oh man. So, all right, cool. So Darrius, welcome to the show, man. Um, let's get the basic, boring, surface level stuff out the way. What you work at Procore? You work as a solutions engineer. What is that? Like dumb that down for me.
Sure. And first of all, appreciate you having me on. Been looking forward to just having a chance to talk to you, rap a little bit. Um, so thank you so much for making a space for me. And
Yeah.
when it comes to being a solutions engineer, it's a very weird cross section between product, sales, development, some marketing every once in a while. Like we're a Swiss Army knife for all things customer facing.
Okay.
So as an SE, there's an expectation that you have to know how to navigate all of these waters at once and wear a bunch of hats. So a lot of our SEs have a lot of true construction experience. There are a few that have absolutely none. I'm somewhere in between, where I've had a lot of construction or construction tangent experience, but nothing like one of the major GCs that we sell to.
Okay. So a solution engineer, would they come in contact with every engineer, or would they get called in at some point at which there is a issue that someone couldn't solve at a lower level?
Yeah, and it happens on several different levels. The SE involvement with the engineering piece. It could be, we're working with a customer or a potential customer prospect, and we get to the 2 yard line, and there's
Yeah.
a product block there
Hmm.
that they say, hey, we can't move forward unless you do this. And
Hmm.
then, we're able to take that information back into the engineering team, be able to communicate with them and work through the development of those tools, because Procore is invaluable if we're not building towards a solution that works for construction.
Hmm.
We're just a software company where a bunch of engineers are sitting in a dark room building what they think construction needs. Then we're going nowhere as a tool.
Do you work closely with product managers? I see that because I just sees to me that just seems like a seamless transitional situation where, because the product managers are obviously trying to create and build new tools for their customers. Is that something where you guys like build like reports, or you guys just will meet on a occasion?
Yeah, and the ideal scenario is that the SC team, because we're client facing, but we have product knowledge and we have industry knowledge, that there would be a more natural marriage working with product. Some SEs work a lot more closely. We call
Yeah.
those overlays. Basically, every product line has an overlay that is a expert in that tool or that tool set,
Yeah.
and they work directly with the product team, taking information from conventional SEs who are client facing.
Okay. And so at what point in your life did you say, I want to grow up and be a solutions engineer when I get older?
Probably like 2 days before I learned what the job was, like going through the Procore message board.
Yeah,
Like,
man. So serious, like that's one of my favorite parts about working in corporate America now is like, I graduated college and was a business major and still had no idea of many roles outside of like accounting and finance and sales. You know what I'm saying? Those are the only three roles that I really knew about within a company. Like how how did you fall into Procore? I know you're from Dallas, and we can start from back to front, or we can just go, start from here and can roll back. But
yeah, we'll start somewhere in the middle.
all right.
I went to New York University, studied mechanical engineering and finance as well. And it was never intention to work in construction or software or sales at that point. Every mechanical engineer wants to build rockets. They want to be the next Tony Stark.
Right.
And that was kind of the idea that I had. But along the way, just paying for school, I was also what we call the Nyu Admissions Ambassadors, where we had a lot of time to spend time with prospective students, talking about our NYU experience and helping them feel comfortable with making a decision to jump on to going to NYU.
So
So,
wait, were you giving the tours too on campus?
oh, hell yeah.
Yes, you were. You were walking backwards. I did.
Oh,
Hell yeah.
man. So they actually put out, like, quick tidbit here, like my last year as an ambassador, they made a rule that we couldn't walk backwards because so many people were walking backwards through Midtown, like
Yeah.
across the street,
Super dangerous.
oncoming traffic.
Yeah.
So I got the side shuttle going on real nice. Like the
Hey,
lateral quickness is on point.
so your sweet spot, I'm assuming, is the parents in those situations, right? Because the kids aren't listening.
Sure. So you capture the minds of the parents and the hearts of the students. That's kind of
Okay.
how the game works.
Right.
Because the students need to be sold a dream. Parents need to be sold a reality. So when we came to doing the tours, I had to be two people at once. It was like, hey, NYU is great. We have a lot of culture. You're gonna have a lot of fun here. Oh, is that James Franco in the distance? And then the kids are just like, this is my dream school. And for parents, they're thinking about it from a different perspective, like, hey, what is my child going to have access to if they come here?
Right.
And you start talking about the realities of NYU. Like I always started price first. Like this school's expensive. I'm working this job because I got to pay for it.
Right.
So when you're making your decision to come to NYU, one of the things you have to consider is, is this going to be a proper financial investment for my students? But I'm going to tell you why I feel like it might be.
Mm-hmm.
So capturing the minds of parents and then the hearts of the students at the same time, that was a part of the deal. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was working in sales. That's just how it worked. And I had a lot of fun in doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So when it came to having those conversations with parents and students, one of the things I kept considering is like, how much of if this experience is gearing towards me being a mechanical engineer?
Mm-hmm.
Granted, a lot of my colleagues or a lot of my classmates who studied in me, they went on to become MEs. That's what they do today.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it was like, the things that are most important to me are the things that I'm learning along the way about how to interact with people, about ideas and visions, and really having more of a tenacity for the way that we approach problem solving. So that was what I was really taking from my NYU experience, because by the time I graduated, and it took a while, having to dig off a bunch of time to get enough money to pay for school, eventually it was just like, do I even want to build rockets anymore? Is that where my passion is? That where my fulfillment is coming from?
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't. Uh, so you start having those questions about, okay, now what the hell am I going to do with my life?
Yeah. So you went to NYU. First of all, I'm so interested, like the admissions ambassador. I was a RA on campus, and I only took that job to obviously pay for the room and board. I was granted a scholarship when I went to Penn State, and mine only covered the academics portion. So, so obviously I took the. But so, what was admissions ambassador that help a lot? Like, what was the benefits of doing that role aside
Yeah,
from the self-fulfillment bullshit?
yeah, and it was mostly just paying for groceries. It wasn't
Oh,
like
okay.
being an ambassador allowed me to fund, paying for classes or tuition or anything like that. It was just like, this is how I survive. This is my job now.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And why did you end up settling on NYU? Again, coming from Dallas, Texas. I mean, are they known for their engineering school?
Yeah, so NYU wasn't known for their engineering school at all, including, technically when I was applying to
Mm-hmm.
universities, the engineering school that would become the Tandon School of Engineering for NYU was actually just an affiliate campus
Okay.
called Brooklyn Polytechnic.
Okay.
So NYU by no means was known for its engineering. And when it came to my decision making about universities, obviously my parents wanted me to stay somewhere local.
Mm-hmm.
My family wanted me to stay as close to Dallas. I was actually kicking around going to the Air Force Academy.
Mm.
Went through that whole thing, which is another very long story. And then I got just one of those random marketing
Yeah.
advertisements in the mail about NYU having an engineering school.
Mm.
And little shout out to the marketing folks. And it does work from time to time. And this marketing lead is talking about its campus and all that. And it's like, that seems pretty cool. I'll consider it. They sent me what we call the dean's application, which is just a free application to submit to go to NYU. I was like, yeah, what the hell? I might as well. Like, what's the worst that could happen?
Right.
And as fortune would have it, I would be in New York City on business my senior year of high school. And it's like, well, I applied to the school, might as well check it out. I was on campus for maybe 45 minutes. The admissions people that I had worked with who knew about me as a person, they did the full court press. Had like the head of admissions, the dean of engineering, all sitting around a table giving me the NYU pitch, and it's like,
Yeah.
all right, I'm sold. Let's do it. Let's make it official.
Now, was that your first time to New York at that point?
Yeah,
Dang.
it was my first 5 hours in New York. The first 3 hours was me seeing Lion King on Broadway because that's been my dream since I was a kid.
Really?
Like
Okay.
I
Yeah.
cried like a baby.
Yeah.
It's great.
Um, Dang man, the marketing piece is funny because I remember in high school I got a bunch of like minority minority like pamphlets from different schools, and I
Yeah.
remember the marketing folks at Santa Barbara, I hope have all been fired. At this point back in '09, they sent me a minority booklet, and it had a photo on the front of three black kids, all look like they're enjoying themselves, obviously. And then in the booklet, as you look through the pages, it's the picture of the same three black people, the same pose, and just different sizes, bro. Like, I promise you, I saved the booklet. I'm like, yo, you see, I was like, oh, okay, so UCSB has three black people. Got it.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, yeah, and it's funny because you're at NYU long enough, you're involved with the admissions piece, you're involved
Yeah.
on campus like I was, and you become those black people or that black person.
Right.
And like the black community at NYU, we're very close knit, and we make that joke all the time. It's like, hey, which one of us are they going to hit up to be a part of the marketing material for this semester?
Yeah. Was there what type of shock did you go through? Or not shock, but what kind of differences did you go through going from Dallas to New York?
Man, it's mad cold.
Yeah. Yo, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the cold was like immediate, but I always thought that Dallas was a big city. And then I moved to New York, which was a really, really tall, this is a really small city with a bunch of people and a bunch of stuff going on in a small amount of place.
Yeah.
So one of the big hurdles for me was like a cultural thing because I'm a Texan. Like we smile, we say yes ma'am, no ma'am, and people gave me shit about that. I mean, to this day about it. And at that point, I had the real Texas accent. This kind of like dull, will come up every once in a while depending on the words that I say. But
Yeah.
like people's news, like, oh, you're not from here, are you? No, ma'am, I'm not from here. So that was a big thing for me, and then just amount of diversity across New York City, because everybody calls it the cultural melting pot, and as much as that is annoying, hearing it for like 1,000 times, it's true in a lot of ways. So it gave me a chance to have exposure to cultures and people, and food that I'd never even considered eating. So that was like a really big part of why I chose New York. More than anything, I just wanted to get out of my bubble.
For sure.
And I wanted to learn who I wanted to be as a person. And I don't think I would have learned that staying in Dallas.
Now, did you have that wherewithal at the time when you picked? The only reason why I asked that is because I wanted to get away from my bubble. I didn't know what the effects would be, but what I did find was that it was helpful in me kind of finding myself. And I've kind of fallen in love with that, getting out of my comfort space, because I think that pushes me to find myself. Like, did you kind of have that going into it, or?
Yeah, so my two favorite authors, or two of my favorite authors of all time, are J.R.R. Tolkien and Frank McCourt. And
J.R.R. Tolkien is the Hobbit guy?
Yeah, the Hobbit guy.
Okay.
So the idea of the hero's journey is about all of his books. They're all about that, starting from this humble beginnings and going so far outside of your comfort zone to really have an adventure that leads to your character development. So that was something that I always thought about as a kid, because The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings were my favorite books growing up. And Frank McCourt wrote this book, which is still to this day my favorite book of all time, called Angela's Ashes. It's about his life growing up in Limerick, Ireland, being extremely poor, being a lot like me, like coming from a really hard family, being considered one of the gifted kids, but also a troublemaker and having a little bit of an eye for debauchery and foolishness. So this whole idea, the book itself is like he finally gets an opportunity. Like his educators see that he could potentially be like a bright student, and they keep pushing him like, hey, get the hell out of Limerick, like get out of Ireland, go see the world. And when I was at this impasse, I was thinking like, I'm going to go to a local university, or worse, somewhere out in the middle of the sticks in Texas, or this school that just kind of fell into my lap. Like it felt like the stars were aligning, where the dwarves show up to my door and say, hey bro, let's go on a journey to slay a dragon. And it's like, all right, let's do that. So for me, it was my hero's journey, and it's what made me feel like I needed to go out there to learn the type of person that I wanted to be.
I should have been reading books when I was younger, man. I had to learn all this stuff on my own. Damn, that's what's up, man. Did you at New York at any point, since you were on your own for the first time, for one of the first times, I'm assuming, right? Did you have, aside from the monetary struggles, did you have any other type of hurdles that you had to overcome?
And it was the first time in my life that I independently considered my mental health.
Okay.
Because being in New York, and people ask me about like my experience in New York, I was there for 8 years, and they asked me, do you love New York? Like, you miss it? It's like New
Mm,
York will forever be my second home. It's where I grew into the man that I am now, or
mm,
started down that path. But it was like the best of times and the worst of times, tales of two cities type of situation, where it almost destroyed me as a human being. Because you go through a lot, like the financial piece is what you understand to be the expectation in college in general. But what I didn't consider is like the loneliness that comes along with being in the city with the most people in the country,
right.
like being surrounded by human beings and also still very much feeling alone everywhere that you went. And then it started compounding with financial struggles, and then the coursework was hard, and then it's trying to figure out and reinvent yourself around all these new people who you don't know, and this weird point in your life where you're trying to figure out what the rest of your life is going to look like, because there
Hmm.
wasn't a okay day one of university, I'm going to be a solutions engineer at Procore when I grow up. It's just like this big question mark of where you go from here. And as an 18-year-old on your own for the first time, there's no real guidebook to teach you how to get there and to teach you how to navigate those waters.
And what did end up helping you get over that hump?
I don't think I ever got over that hump. To be honest, it was more of like you just keep pushing forward,
Hmm.
because that hump was there every single day. There was something that we had to really keep in perspective. I became a very much a day at a time kind of guy, instead of making these grandiose plans going forward. And my time in New York wasn't all like just getting kicked in the stomach, but it was a lot of it.
Hmm.
And a lot of it required me to just take a step back,
Hmm.
take a breath, and look at like the opportunity that I have here, and just continue to be encouraged that you made it this far. Because if you go back to those books that I was reading, like you read The Hobbit, it's like they get captured by trolls, and
Right.
like the first like 5 chapters of the book, and they're gonna get eaten. It's like, okay, this is your trolls. You're about to get eaten right now.
Yeah.
They made it out of that,
Yeah.
and you're just always thinking about stuff like that.
Dang, man. I should have read books more as a kid. I'm upset, man. I'm upset. So, the your earlier years, you seem like you were. Were you always like a scholarly kid? What did you think you were going to be in high school at this point? I looked at your LinkedIn. You have a gang of accolades. I mean, Texas Boys and Girls Club Youth of the Year. I don't even know what that would entail, but I'm assuming you showed up every day on time and cleaned really well. I'm assuming.
Yeah, yeah, a
uh,
little bit of that.
yeah. So what were those high school years like?
Sure, and to really understand my upbringing, you have to understand, my muse, the person that I try to emulate as much as possible, and the person who raised me for most of my life was my great grandma.
Hmm.
So she was my great grandma, so my mom's grandma, and she basically raised me since I was about 3 months, and was on the front lines until I was a teenager. And she grew up in Texas. She grew up in the deep South, extremely well educated, extremely hardworking, and the kind of person that they cared a lot about, cared a lot about really putting people in the proper place to succeed.
Hmm.
And she took definitely a vested interest in me and my sister to be that way. Whereas there was no time for us to make excuses about our disposition. Like for me, I'm an extremely shy person, and I tell it to people all the time, especially on first dates, because I tend to be sweating profusely. And it's like I'm a shy person. I don't talk all that much, and it's like, well, you talk to people for a living every single day for hours
Right.
on end.
Right.
And it's like, no, this is something that I have to do because it's a part of being an adult. But as a kid, I didn't talk in school. I didn't talk to the other students. I hardly talk to my teachers unless you earn that trust that I can go tell you. I could tell you what's going on with me, and I would only directly communicate with my grandma about anything. Like I could be starving for days and wouldn't ask for food
Hmm.
unless my grandma was there for me to ask for it. So she saw that, immediately because, it was brought to her attention by her teachers. And there's like, hey, does he have some learning disability? Like, is there something that we need to like put him in special classes? And for my grandma, it wasn't like today where we hear that and it's like, okay, we can give this student some help and we can help them get in a proper place where they're getting the support they need. But my grandma, though, was like, nope, they're going to put a label on my great grandson when he's 7 years old and he's never going to be able to shake that.
Mm-hmm.
So my grandma, as warm and nice and loving as a human being, this woman is hard as about everything. So she straight up told me there was two things that I ran into when I was a kid. One, he's not a talker. He does not like to talk.
Yeah.
So, I didn't read books as I like to. My grandma literally brought me this old tattered book called what I call the Hoobit at the time that she called the Hoobit because, I mean, that's just sort of was. And she's like, here, read this to me. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, stand here and read.
Yeah.
And on Saturday mornings, shit you not, she would make me stand there and read her this book and aloud. And then when people came over, she made me stand there and read them a book, like chapters of a book. And for about stuff that they didn't care about, they come in like 10 chapters into this book about dwarves and elves and little hobbits. And I'm trying to read to them. And they're like, oh, that's great, Darrius. Thank you for that. So she was not a kind of person that wanted me to feel like there were any limitations on what
That's amazing.
And the second thing was my handwriting. My handwriting was atrocious, and it only played into that narrative of like, hey, is something wrong with him? Do we need to get him some help? So my grandma's like, oh, bet. So on Sunday morning, before the Cowboys played, she gave me this like long legal pad and a pen and said, write your name. And I wrote my name. She said, do it again.
Oh.
And I ended up doing that until the legal pad was done. Like it was, every single page was my name, several columns of me just writing my name. And then she's like, all right, now write me a story. And she wanted me to create my own characters and tell my own stories. And they all ended up just being some slight variation of the Hobbit.
Hobbit, right. The Black Hobbit.
Right, the Black Hobbit. Like we pulled up out of Oak Cliff, also known as the Shire. And look, and when I would write these stories, and she's like, okay, now read me your story aloud. And it's like, if you can't read your own handwriting, that means you need to rewrite your story. And that's just what we did every single weekend. And I didn't get it at the time. It just felt like this tedious thing that my grandma made me do because she didn't want me watching TV or get out in the streets. But it was more of just like training that you have been given a criticism here about how you perform, and it's up to you to make those changes. But you don't know that yet because you're a child. Yeah,
your grandmother was the Tom Landry of parenting, man.
Man, look, like, and she was no nonsense about it either. And to the point where I started to enjoy it. It's like I'd wake up in the morning, get me a bowl of oatmeal, and start writing my new short story. And then coming to talk to her about it. Like I was still very much a shy person, but when someone told me to answer a question in class, it was like this elocution that had come from practicing talking to people for 5 hours every weekend, strictly off the cuff. So that was the kind of person that she was.
So the man. So a knock on me from my friend is that I don't know how to like relax and just chill. Like I'm never just sitting down. I got to do something. And I attribute a lot of that to, as a kid, I remember my dad and my mom are separated. And so like the times I was at my dad's house, he was, he's a doctor, but when he's home, he's always either, reading a book or he's learning new medical terms and whatever. So, I'm a kid. So I go to my dad. I'm like, Dad, I'm bored, and he said, he's like, there's no such thing as being bored. I'm like, what do you like? No, come on, Dad, I'm bored. And he's like, all right, well, take that dictionary. I want you to write me a book report on 5 pages of the dictionary. Every time he ever heard me utter the word bored. So I was never bored ever again, right? He made me do that about 6 or 7 times. And I really very quickly found activities to do. And little things like that where it's so funny because like you think about how you were raised there, like, and then do you ever think about how your classmates were raised? And like, do you ever feel like kind of like an alien sometimes? Like there's no way that they had this same upbringing that I did.
100%. And you just triggered me so much on the whole dictionary piece and the bored piece. Cause my grandma's like, only boring people get bored. and it's like if you're bored, I can find you something to do.
Exactly.
So yeah, and to your point about how other kids are raised, because I could hear and see them outside like running around doing their whole thing. And I'm like, asking my grandma, was like, hey, can I just like, just go outside and
Yeah.
hang out with them? It's like, no,
No.
you're all right. You're all right here because I can see you, and you can, and I can know exactly what you're doing. I know you're gonna be out of trouble. It's like, all right, well, I,
Man,
yeah,
man, it's like at the time I like it. Yeah, I mean I didn't hate it. I enjoyed a lot of it at the time, but there was those teenage and college years where you really realize it's like, damn, this was like moderately like a camp, as opposed to all these other kids. They talk about all these things they did with their families and stuff, and I'm so appreciative of the principles that I was taught early on. I think they've helped me a lot. Overcoming. I think I'm able to overcome most challenges because of the things that I was raised. And I'm sure that you could probably say the same for yourself.
yeah, and it's a thing that when you talk to your parents about, you start questioning their motives, and they hit you with the like, you understand when you're older,
Mhm.
and that's like a blanket black parent response to anything, no matter
Right.
how absurd the thing they're asking you to do. And like 60% of the time, it's complete bullshit. Like I'm not going to understand when I'm older. I'm going to
Right.
also feel like it was ridiculous because it was. But that 40% of the time
Yeah.
is that you'll understand when you're older is the importance of being hardworking and what does hard work look like, about preparing and over preparing, about not cutting any corners, about caring about the small details, about not procrastinating. Like those are the type of things where I felt like um, it was because of my grandma like being such a drill sergeant on those ideals that it became a part of my personality. Like those developmental years as a kid are so important because they basically determine the way that you exist in the world around you, where you can see
Mm.
your contemporaries like, oh, they haven't started on this project and it's due tomorrow.
Mhm.
Well, why am I doing it 2 weeks early? Why am I spending time talking to my teachers after school about an assignment I got a 98 on just
Mhm.
so I can get the 100?
Mhm.
And things like that. And it's like, why am I having to work this hard? And my
Mhm.
grandma knew because she grew up in like the 30s in Texas.
Right.
Like, her high school was 7 kids, they're all black, and she was the only girl. And she went to cosmetology school and eventually nursing school as well, and she was the only black woman there as well.
Mm.
So this whole idea of her idea of working hard was like, this is what it means to survive in the world that we live in. And she was not prepared. She was not willing to let me feel like the world was going to change in a way and that I didn't have to work that hard. She wanted me to be prepared for the eventuality that it didn't.
And
So like
and
that hard work was going to be there.
and the generational gap that you and your sister are going through at this point. You obviously you are being raised by your grandmother, great grandmother, and then you're going to school, and I've got to assume that was maybe a little tough to connect with some of the other kids. Again, you haven't told me this before, so if I'm wrong, tell me. But I feel like that maybe there was a difficulty there, just because everything your grandmother is telling you is like way above, right, the age range of which most of your peers are pretty much used to.
Yeah. So and the story I always tell people, because you're 100% correct that
Hmm.
that generational gap is absurd. Because when I would ask my grandma like, hey, can I go spend the night over at my friend's house? And he's like, why? We got a house here. Like, you have a bed. Like, why do you need to go and like spend the night?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, because we want to, play video games. It's like, no, that's not a thing we're going to be doing around here. And it's like, but this is like a normal thing that kids do. And the same thing when it came to like going out, riding bikes, like hanging out with the kids in the summer. Like, I never did any of that until I was like really, really deep into my teens.
Ugh.
Because my grandma, or like it was tangent to being in school or the Boys and Girls Club,
Yeah.
because my grandma was like, I grew up in this neighborhood. Her and my great grandfather were the first black people in our neighborhood.
Mm.
And so, my grandma, her daughter, hanging out in that neighborhood was dangerous because every single one of your neighbors were just looking like, there goes the neighborhood. It wasn't like you going to go ride your bike with your friend Sally
Right.
down the street. It's like, no, Sally's dad might actually shoot you
Right.
just because they don't want you in this neighborhood. So she grew up in this idea, the place that we lived. It's like, I'm going to protect my family by keeping them in the house. And she didn't get that. Like, our neighborhood is all black now. Like, there's only black
That's
people
crazy.
anywhere.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, this I can protect you here. I can't protect you out there.
Your grandma gentrified the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Man, so at what point was like race brought to your attention? Because I remember we lived in the Bay Area, which is like one of the most culturally diverse areas in the world. So my little young eyes didn't see what my dad was talking about. But man, every chance my dad got, he would be like, "Hey, you know, this may be because you're black, or you need to understand like these cops." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like, I go to school with white kids, like their families like me. I have Asian friends. Like, what do you?" I used to think my dad was crazy until I left and finally got that outside perspective of racial matters in America. I had no idea what he was talking about.
Sure. And for me, it's a weird thing to tell people, but I didn't see a white person until I was like 9 or 10 years old, like in
For
person.
real?
Did not see a white person ever.
Damn.
Like my entire neighborhood was completely black. My elementary school was black. Like all of my teachers were black. Until I got into like the fourth grade, and there was only one who's an art teacher, who's like the first year art teacher out of her university, coming to do well in the rundown neighborhood.
She drew the short straw.
And look, she saw Freedom Riders once and was just like, "That's going to be me." It's like, that's not how this is going to play out.
Sandra Bullock.
So like growing up in Texas and being black in a predominantly black neighborhood, black culture is such a pervasive part of your upbringing. Like Black History Month, like there's nothing like Black History Month at an all black school in Texas. Like we're talking like oratorical contests, we're talking praise dancers, we're talking skits,
right,
speeches, like all of these things that are happening to elevate the history of our people. And this wasn't just for February. That was ingrained in everything that we did. Like we learned about black authors. We learned about, the impacts of slavery. And my teachers had to teach the curriculum that the state gave us, which was, the curriculum that tells you that slavery was an unpaid internship with free housing.
No,
like that was the curriculum. But they said, all right, so I'm letting y'all know this is what this book says because you needed to pass the standardized test. Yeah. And let me tell you about what slavery was. Let me tell you about what racism was. What about the civil rights movement? And then, I'd learn these little tidbits from my teachers, and I go home and ask my grandma, and it's like, my teacher told me this crazy stuff about these people like putting on like hoods and stuff and like trying to kill black people in the streets. And I think he's just trying to scare me, like burning crosses and all of that. And my grandma was like washing the dishes, and she just like dramatically just sighed and just put the dish back in the water. And it's just like, come over here, I want to talk to you about something.
Right.
And she starts telling me about where she grew up in a small, very wholesome town called Kilgore, Texas. It's out in East Texas. My family's still out there today, and she's telling me about her upbringing and what it felt like to be be my age that I was at that point, but in the 40s in Texas, in rural Texas, in the middle of nowhere, Texas. And it's like those stories that your teacher told you, they aren't stories. These are things that happen to people in our family, and to her brothers and sisters, because my grandma ended up raising 5 generations of kids. That first generation was her own. It was her brothers and sisters. And she ended up having her own child. And she ended up having her child ended up having my mom, and my mom ended up having my sister and I.
Yeah.
So she raised all these generations of kids, and through every single one of those generations, they dealt with this idea of racism, that it wasn't just an idea. It wasn't like some looming boogeyman that people tried to scare you with, like old wives' tale. It's like, no, that's my neighbor. And that stuff actually happened. So when we started talking about growing up in the neighborhood that I did and the environment that I did, hearing about those stories in school, learning about it in history, and then having to go home, it's like, no, I'm going to tell you what Black history is, because it's just the things that I grew up with as a kid. And that really cultivated my idea of Blackness as a young kid. And eventually, when I got to middle school, I was one of those kids that they wanted to get out of that neighborhood. I was one of the chosen few there. So I had an opportunity to go to a very special school on the other side of town, the good side of town.
Yeah.
Where it wasn't like, oh, I've seen like 2 white people in person in my entire life. It's like, I'm like one of 5 black students in this school of 300 kids, and
Wow.
all of my teachers are white people.
Right. And
And it
you're
was
not,
just like
oh my gosh, that must have been crazy for you at first.
terrifying,
Yeah.
absolutely terrifying. And you know, and it was hard. And
Did
you
you
know, my
have
girl,
that at all? Like you like oh like you felt like you had to prove that you were smarter than everybody else, or at least as smart?
yeah, and that was the training that I was subconsciously getting from my grandma, because
Yeah.
it was one of those times where it's like, I got the highest grade in the class, I got a 95. Why are you on my butt about missing this one question?
Yeah.
It's like, because you don't get to miss one question.
Right.
And I said, you know, why? And she pulled out the big joker. It's like, you'll understand when you're older. It's like, okay.
Right.
And so you have this overachiever type of kid who grew up in a really destitute neighborhood, who grew up with a lot of crime and poverty around him, and you know, you excel in everything you did up until you went to this new school, and then you get there, and then every single one of the kids who are around you got a better education than you, had tutors, and they were gifted in ways that I was not.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a humbling and also mortifying experience to consider that you are no longer the smartest kid in the class. You might not even be in the top 50% of this class. So I couldn't just get by on being like bright. It was like, okay, now how do you separate yourself? How do you make up for that gap that everybody else has around you, where they can go and use a computer when they get home to do this report, or they can go ask their tutor about this question they don't understand? How do you bridge that gap? And the question was work ethic. And it wasn't something I had to learn at that point, because if I had to learn it at that point, I was already behind the 8 ball. These are things that had been conditioned in me. It's like, hey, you know that one question that you got wrong, and I told you can't get it wrong. Like, now you definitely can't get it wrong.
Right.
And you need to understand that you have to go back and make sure that every single thing you do from this point forward is about excellence and not just being good enough. There's no such thing as good enough. Don't let good enough be good enough. Like that was the mentality. And it was hard because, you know, a lot of these kids came from better schools. They were brighter. They had both their parents at home. Education was on the forefront. They didn't have to worry about anything else.
Tutor at the house. Yeah. I remember you know, I went to the Oakland school district like up until middle school. And for me, it was like, I just showed up and, you know, I tested well usually. And, you know, homework was easy. You know, I barely ever had to do it. I was able to get it done at school. And then transferred to like one of the top public schools in the area. And this is now a situation where I'm one of 10 black kids of 280. And, you know, everybody else is just as smart or incredibly smarter than me. Right. And it's like, first few tests, I did terrible, man. And it was the work ethic for me, though. I didn't have that work ethic. I did not have that. And that was hard. That was definitely a hard adjustment. But for most of my high school, man, I was always, until I just gave up. Not gave up, like didn't try anymore, but I tried to be the smartest kid in the class, and it was putting way too much pressure on myself.
Yeah, and that's the other side of that coin. Is when you've been conditioned to feel like you have to achieve excellence in everything, you're going to fail. Like there's some things that you're simply going to fail at, because that's just the nature of academics, one, and of life as a whole. So when you put that type of stress on yourself that I have to be the best, it creates this almost impenetrable barrier, where you keep banging your head against this wall and you're never going to get there. And the only person who's being hurt in the process is you.
Mm-hmm. So coming up, did you have any role models or mentors that kind of helped, you know, guide you outside of your grandmother?
Yeah, and I spent a lot of time in the Boys and Girls Club. My grandma was so anti me just running the streets because she saw what was out there.
Yeah.
And she knew that there was nothing out there for me that was going to be good. So my elementary school was, I shit you not, like a 2-minute drive away from our house and maybe a 7-minute walk, and with my little kid legs.
Yeah.
And my grandma never once in my life let me walk to school by myself.
Oh, for real?
She drove me to school every single day. And the wildest part about it is that my elementary school shared the same football and baseball field as my Boys and Girls Club. So I literally just had to walk across the football field to get to the Boys and Girls Club. He said, nah, I'm going to come to school to drive you around the corner, which is a 20-second drive. To get there, it's like I don't even want you to have to walk across that field because
Wow.
I know the landmines that are in that field. Like
What?
it's not just a quick walk. It's it's a quick walk, and then one of the older kids like, hey, you want to come hang out with us at the basketball court,
Right.
or people who are just like looking for issues, and she wasn't willing to risk it.
Right.
Yeah, so through the Boys and Girls Club, that's where I really got a chance to foster my love for science and also literature, because they had books and computers and all this other stuff that I didn't have at home,
Yeah.
and I got to just throw myself in it. And it was also a place where I was guaranteed to get another meal.
Hmm.
So, like, that's one of the things that I loved about school is that it was a place of safety for me. And
Hmm.
all of my teachers were like my best friends, probably my
Hmm.
only friends for a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And it was also a place where small stuff like I guaranteed I'm gonna get 2 meals if I go to school. I'm
Right.
guaranteed to get a snack when I go to the Boys and Girls Club, which are things I wasn't guaranteed at home.
Right.
So it became a place of safety for me, allowing me to grow as a person, and that's where a lot of my mentors put their arms around me. Football coaches, academic coaches, and it's also where I ended up being put in a program as a teenager for at-risk youth who may need a little extra guidance, who have
Hmm.
that potential to do something great with their lives, but don't
Hmm.
have the direction at home because their home life is in tatters. And that's where I ended up meeting a person who would change my life in ways that I still can't even fathom 15 years later.
Hmm.
A person who I consider to be my mom. It was through one of these programs. So a lot of mentors along the way, a lot of people who put their necks out for me because I mean I grew up to be eventually like when you're a powder keg of angst because of how you grew up and anger because your parents aren't there and just animosity at your classmates who come from these nice neighborhoods and have all these great support systems whose parents show up to every single one of their sporting events or show up to all of their to their academic events.
Mm.
You're a time bomb of a human being,
Oh
and when
yeah.
you're a time bomb as a black person, as a young black person at that, as a young black male at that,
Yeah.
um, there's a whole lot of bad that could come out of that.
Hmm.
And luckily enough people around me saw two things. They saw, we're coming down to the last 10 seconds on that time bomb.
Hmm.
And we also saw the potential of who I was as a person, which
Hmm.
required you to see me as a human being. So enough of those people, came into my life and allowed me to fill in those gaps that I felt were missing in my life with love and comfort, where I was filling it with anger and rage and animosity.
Yeah. So how do you go from that anger rage bomb to meeting Obama? Please, you gotta. How do we get there?
Yeah, and that's a very interesting story because I became very invested in my neighborhood at a very young age.
Yeah.
Also, very invested in my Boys and Girls Club and the things that we did there. And a lot of what I wanted to do was evoke change. I wanted to make this to be a place where everybody felt welcome and to fix our neighborhood and take those stories that my grandma told me about, the people uh, like Martin Luther King who are part of, civil rights movement and John Lewis, like those type of human beings that help better shape the world going forward. Like I wanted to do that on a micro level, just within my neighborhood. And the Boys and Girls Club gave me that opportunity. So I spent a lot of time volunteering, helping out, doing a lot of cleaning, mopping a whole lot of floors, and this is a story that I love to tell. It's about a woman named Lois Cross, who was the head of the Boys and Girls Club in Dallas, in Oak Cliff specifically. And we couldn't afford the membership between me and my sister for me to keep going there. And like without going to the Boys and Girls Club, I don't know where my life would be. So
Hmm.
I went to Miss Lois, and I was like, Miss Lois, like we can't pay membership this year. Like I don't know what to do. And Miss Lois said, you look. You come here every day, you mop those floors, you sweep the locker room, and I'll pay for your membership. You do that every single day, and I'll pay for your membership. I guarantee it. And she's like, I want you to work hard because work hard pays off.
Hmm.
And I came in like clockwork. I cleaned those floors like people were supposed to eat off of them.
Hmm.
And I was appreciative in a way that made her feel like I was going to be something meaningful in my life. And one day she came and took the broom for me and like handed me one of this book that she wanted me to read, and also let me know that we were going to be starting this computer program. in the Boys and Girls Club, and she's like, "You got to go here now. Like, if you want to be a part of this club, you got to go to this computer science club where they taught robotics,
Yeah.
taught some basic programming, some HTML before there was any MySpace. It's like you're gonna go learn this stuff." It's like, "Why?" It's like, "Because you'll like it." It's like, "All right, fair." And you'll like it, and you'll understand when you're older. So she was one of those people, and she helped me find my voice more than anything, because she's like, "Hey, I've read your writing. I've talked to your teachers. They are right across the field, uh, and I talk to them all the time. Like, I've seen your grades. I've seen the way that you present ideas. Why are you so shy?
Huh.
Like, why are you not talking? Why are you not speaking out? Why aren't you doing something?"
Yeah.
And she's like, "Okay, we can fix that." So just like my grandma
Yeah.
had this whole idea of like, I'm going to personally intervene in your development to make sure that that you grow up to be a person who's confident. Ms. Lois was just like, no more of the kitty glove stuff. We have we have a teen program here called Keystone. You're going to be the president of it. I don't care about democracy. We don't vote here. Like, I've made you the president.
Oh my gosh.
You start every single meeting. You develop programs. You talk about how we can better improve the community. And it's like, I'm going to put you in this position. Oh, and there's a big conference that we have every year for the teens. It's in another state, and they need a group of teenagers to really guide us on how we develop it. You're going to be on the steering committee.
You
So
must
she would
have,
take,
when you first heard that though, your heart sunk, I'm sure, or
man, look,
just your stomach sunk at least.
it's just like, like, you ever been in class and like a teacher call on you on something like to answer a question, you haven't been listening for a smooth like 30 minutes,
Right.
that type of anxiety.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do that to you in every single chance that she could find, because it's like you have too much of a voice to simply just sit in the shadows."
Yeah.
So it became a situation where she made me do like emceeing award events and like going to Boys and Girls Club fundraisers and meeting with donors and all these other things.
Oh my gosh.
And it's like, "Ms. Lois, like, why do I have
Yeah.
to keep doing this?"
Yeah. Why do
And
you
she,
hate me?
yeah, it's like, "What have I done to piss you
Yeah.
off?" And all these things that were put together and I had a chance to do. And it was the beginning of my senior year of high school, and it just came an expectation that I was that person. So Ms. Lois brought me into her office one day, and she just says, "Hey, look, I want to tell you something." I was like, "What's going on, Ms. Lois? What can I do for you today?" And she's like, "I've nominated you for Youth of the Year of this Boys and Girls Club." Which within the Boys and Girls Club is like this acknowledgement that your peers and the people that you work along with and the people that you impact have considered you to be the person that has had the most long-lasting impact on this neighborhood.
Mm.
And for me, that was my Purple Heart, that was my Grammy, that was my MVP trophy, that was my Hall of Fame jacket. Like, that was me saying that all that work that I put in, keeping my nose clean, staying out of trouble, like, that was the culmination of all the things that were my grandma's legacy. And it made me so proud because I won for my Boys and Girls Club. And I felt so happy, like fist pumping, like, "Thanks, Miss Lois." And she's like, "Whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, where are you going?"
Yeah.
Like, "What do you mean?"
I thought that was it.
Like,
You're like, cool. I'm gonna go.
Like, I'm gonna post up. I'm gonna get my face in the Boys and Girls Club newspaper.
Right.
Like, it's gonna be great. And it's like,
Right.
no. See, the way that this works is that there are 14 Boys and Girls Clubs in the greater Dallas area. Each of their Youth of the Years compete for the Dallas Youth of the Year. It's like, well, why do I need to do that? Like, well, I'm good here. Like, I'm not from the greater Dallas. I'm from Oak Cliff.
Right.
And like all the kids that I grew up with, like my age, older and younger, they see me as this person who is doing good things.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've achieved enough. Like, this is good for me.
This is good. Yeah.
It's like, no, you got to go and compete for Dallas. And it's like, Ms. Lois.
Yeah.
And Ms. Lois was much like my grandma. She's just like, if you keep in score, you might as well win.
Right.
Like, and so the way that this competition works is that you have to bring together your portfolio of all that you've achieved. And then you had to start talking about, what are your plans for the future and how do you feel like the Boys and Girls Club is going to positively impact the youth that are coming behind you and you going forward as a functioning member of society? Because I'm 17 years old. I'm a man in the eyes of Texas. So we have these competitions, and a part of the competition is also talking to the board, Greater Dallas, like all the major donors, because they get to choose who's going to represent the mission of Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Dallas. So I come in this like really ill-fitting suit that my grandma got from Macy's, um, and like this really ugly tie,
Right.
and sitting around this table of people who are lawyer, doctor, business person,
Yeah.
former senator, like all of these human beings who've achieved on levels that I can't even fathom, who drive the
Right.
nice cars and live in the country club parts of town and stuff like that. And you're talking about the impacts of the Boys and Girls Club, and I did that, and lo and behold, I won for Dallas.
That's
And
crazy.
at that point, I met Charles English, who's the CEO of Boys and Girls Club at Gator Dallas, and he's like, "Congratulations, Darrius. This is a award that lets you know that of the 14 Boys and Girls Club, we consider you to be the polished product that we generate here, that we want all of our students to be." Which again was a massive honor for me. It's like, I appreciate that so much. Thank y'all so much. And then I just like trying to walk away, and Charles like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. Where are you going?" It's like, "What do you mean?" It's like, "Oh, there's responsibilities that come along with this."
You're like,
So
no.
it's like, why are y'all doing this? And it was like charity function. It was keynoting every single donor event. It was going to dinners. It was spending a bunch of nights with the person who I consider to be my mom, who actually became my mom because she was the one who had to be my plus one for all of this.
Right.
And like staying up late, like I can't stay up late to watch the end of the Cowboys game, but I can stay up late to go to a charity function.
Right.
And like it was absolutely boring. And you're talking about reform, and you're talking about the foundations of the Boys and Girls Club and the impacts it has on youth, and you're doing that at 17.
Yeah.
And with that, it's like, hey, you won Dallas, so you have to compete in North Texas. And it's like, oh fuck, now I'm sorry. And it's like, well, now I got to do that.
You can cuss.
It's like, all right, North Texas, fine.
Right.
And I'll won in North Texas, and it's like, all right, cool, so we're good now. It's like, oh, no.
But like at that point, because now you won North Texas, that's the third layer. Like, are you just like, I'm having a lucky streak, or are you like recognizing that you have something to offer? Like where are you at this point? Because if I've won 3 competitions in a row, you wouldn't be able to tell me shit. I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I never won anything growing up.
Yeah, it felt like winning the lottery, and then that double-sided sword that I keep in my back pocket, it rears its ugly head, where it's just like you start to think like, oh, I might be that guy at this point. Like this might be shooter's luck, or I might just be, good at this.
Mm-hmm.
And the other side of that sword is everybody's going to figure out that you're not that guy and that you're not good at this.
Imposter syndrome.
The imposter syndrome comes back. And it's like people are putting you on the bigger and bigger pedestals. And you know why they do that? It's because that fall is going to be glorious.
That's such a horrible thought to have, man. Yeah. But we all have it. That's so bad.
Yeah, it is like one of those situations. Like when it was just my club, it's like a small little pizza party of people
exactly
talking about you. Like when it was all of Dallas, it was the board directors or the people who helped raise a lot of money patting you on the back.
Right.
When you start winning North Texas and Texas, that's when you start getting in the newspaper, and then the news starts showing up to your school, and like all this other stuff, and then. I had a chance to compete, and I eventually won Texas. And it's like, all right, we're good. There's nothing more that I need to accomplish here. It's like, whoa, there's 5 different regions of Boys and Girls Club globally. So now
Texas
you got to compete
in this state, man. Texas is a big state, man.
And the only reason, like the regional part was funny because there's like, okay, well, the regional part is going to be here in Dallas, and our biggest donor is going to really host the event because all of these levels come with different like charity functions and speeches and breakfasts and all this stuff. It's like our biggest donor here is going to host the regional level of this competition. And it's like, all right, whatever. It's like, yeah, our biggest donor is Jerry Jones, and we're going to have it at the Cowboys Stadium this year. I was like, all right, let's go ahead and do this. Say less. Say absolutely less. So, just as a side there, Jerry Jones is probably one of the more famous Boys and Girls Club alumni. He grew up boxing in the Boys and Girls Club. He also grew up he grew up really poor, and he gives a lot of money to the Boys and Girls Club. I didn't know it at the time, but he paid for most of like our equipment or football and stuff throughout the years.
Yeah.
And so at this level, we get the full Jerry Jones treatment because he was also being inducted into the Boys and Girls Club Hall of Fame. So we had a chance to go to Valley Ranch. We met with the players. I got to meet Jerry Jones and like touch the Cowboys trophy and wear his rings and talk to him. And I actually developed a pretty good relationship with Jerry Jones throughout this program. So, and the culminating part of all of this was I got to deliver one of these speeches talking about the merits of why the Boys and Girls Club was important in front of all of my family and friends, because this is local. I'm the only person who's local here because
Yeah.
I won Texas.
Yeah.
I got to watch, I do it in front of all of my favorite football players sitting in the front row, like cheering for me the
That's
way that I
crazy.
cheer for them,
Right.
with Jerry Jones in the middle of the Cowboys Stadium in front of 40,000 people.
That's crazy.
And it was
The kid that could, the shy kid, the shy kid that wouldn't talk, bro. This is amazing.
Bro, and it was the first time in my entire life where I approached the proverbial and literal stadium lights with the utmost confidence. One, because at that size of a venue and those amount of lights, you can't see nobody outside of the first few tables.
Right.
And this is Cowboy Stadium, and that's Jerry Jones, and this is a thing that I've won 4 times now, and I'm at home and I'm comforted and I feel empowered, and I feel like all that hard work that I put in, I put all these people who had dedicated time and effort and love into my life to make me this human being.
Mm-hmm.
They're all here to support me, and I felt so powerful and like I belong there. Like all these people are here to see me, and that's the way that I approached it. And I was fortunate enough to win regional as well. And it was like this great thing because they brought out like the Cowboys cheerleaders and the players and to congratulate me on stage. And it was just like this surreal moment that I still don't think is real.
Right.
And I had the night to just chill and hang out and have some fun. And then the next morning is that 8 a.m. debrief of now I have a staff of human beings who are responsible for how I go about myself. And it's like, okay, so the next step, we have to start prepping your speech to Congress, and then start talking about how we're going to talk about, or what we're going to talk about for President Obama. Oh, and what are you going to wear for this seat? And it's like, well, time out, pause. Let's take a step back here. I think y'all are moving a few steps too fast.
We say Congress?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Barack? You mean Obama? And it's like, yeah, you're going to have to go and meet with the president a couple times if that's all right with you.
Oh my gosh! He said a couple times.
Yeah, and the weird thing here is that. Because Boys and Girls Clubs have obviously a lot of really famous alumni who come in and really help to push the messaging. It's like, yeah, we have to also figure out who your escort is going to be. And I think, Mr. Washington's going to do it this time. And it's like, who? And it's like Denzel Washington. He's like the most famous Boys and Girls Club alumni of all time. So on this like, let's put this whole thing in context. This shy, nerdy kid from the rough part of Dallas in Oak Cliff, who grew up being so sheltered his grandma wouldn't let him walk 5 minutes to school, is now being escorted personally by Denzel Washington to meet the first black president in the White House to talk about education reform that will impact millions of kids. And this is all happening in a span of basically a decade. And when I tell people this story, and I talk about what hard work feels like, and why I am the way I am about my job, it's like I've already lived the most difficult parts of my life. I've already done the hardest work that I could possibly consider, and I did it at such a young age. Like telling me to sell software, this is the easiest part of my day.
When you put that in perspective, like this shit's easy. What are you talking about?
Yeah, and I finally got to that point. January of 2017, my grandma passed away. She died at 89. She had kidney failure, which she told nobody about because my grandma is me. I'm my grandma. I'm stubborn as hell.
Right.
Where she was suffering and she didn't want to be a burden to anyone, so her organs basically failed over time. And by the time that anybody found out about it, she was 6 weeks off her deathbed anyway. So that moment was the hardest day of my entire life, having to bury my grandma. And at that same time, the first clump of dirt that hit her casket when we put it in the ground, that was that moment that you understood when you got older. Because as soon as we lowered it down and we said our last feelings about it, every single thing that I'd ever endured, that I had to work through between school as a kid, the imposter syndrome of being a black kid, dealing with the police, dealing with the crime in my neighborhood, dealing with the worst gangs you can ever think of between the people who live there and the people who had the badges. Like those were the gangs that you had to worry about. To having to go through Boys and Girls Club, doing this thing with the president, having to represent so many kids and be a voice for so many people. as well as being a college student and fall into the normal pitfalls of being a college student. The pressure that comes with that, uh, the visibility that comes with you being in a microscope in every single thing that you do, and so many eyes and so many people feeling like you should be a polished, perfect human being at 19. Uh, all of that stuff that was the foundation of my existence, that all came in perspective. It's like this person who I just put into the ground worked her ass off for me to go through the adversity that I did. And I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be in this opportunity without her. And when I wake up every day and I feel like, man, buyers are liars and not going to get this deal in, we're not hitting our numbers, like, COVID's impacting, our new ARR, and, people are worried about IPO and all this other stuff. And there's pressure that comes along with the role that I'm in at Procore. I think about all the shit that I've been through in life. And it's like, if this is the worst that your life gets, you have lived a great and successful life, and your grandma's proud of you no matter how you perform today. But like she said, if you keep in score, you might as well fucking win. And that's the way that I approach every single day.
Bro, I feel like running through a brick wall right now. Damn, man. And it's just so funny, the juxtaposition of like today, we work at a tech company, and obviously we're working from home because of COVID right now. But back when you're in the office and you hear some of the complaints, right? And you like, what's wrong with you? Like, you see, we got kombucha everywhere. And
bro, I didn't even know what kombucha was like before I got here. And it's just such a weird thing about perspective, because, even in the scope of what's happening in the world, like we're in such a better position than so many other people. And I would feel like I'm doing myself, my family, and those around me a disservice by doing anything less than 100% every single day.
Right.
This is a great opportunity that we have, and I feel thankful for it every day.
And that's part of a reason why when I get people that I feel like aren't giving 100% or at least remotely even close to trying, like, you don't have to be the smartest person, but you can outwork your downfalls. I have the hardest time respecting those people. Like, and I think that's a huge issue with myself. How I show up at work sometimes is not everybody gives 100%, and I find that super disrespectful. It's just because of the way I was raised and the way you're talking about you were raised, right? That was 100% is the bare minimum, right? Yeah.
And one of those things that my grandma, my coaches, because we very much had, like, if you had noticed, we had this very much village mentality of how we raise kids in the place that I grew up. And a lot of those kids don't make it, but the ones who unfortunately, a lot of those kids don't make it, but a lot of them, like the way that we instill this idea of preparation and working hard, is that you might always win. Sometimes when it comes to life, you're gonna get beat sometimes, but being beat doesn't mean that you lost. And if you know, like, there's a difference between being beat and losing. And the nature of the work that we do, being beat means that there's somebody who has a better product offering, a better fit, they're at a better timing, like all these things lined up for them. Whereas, like, no matter what we did, we would never be able to compete on that level.
Right.
That's a level of that situation where you feel like, I just simply got beat, and that's fine. There's always going to be someone smarter and faster, more well equipped to handle a situation than you are. And that's a part of that humility that comes along with perspective. Like, sometimes somebody's just gonna whoop my ass, and that's fine.
I really believe that most of my biggest learning lessons have come from losses. Right. I've tried to rebrand that whole taking a loss to taking a learning opportunity. And I know that's super cheesy, but my life is cheesy, man. When is the last loss that you've taken that turned out to be a really positive thing?
Sure. And when it comes to that dichotomy between being beaten and loss, I consider a loss on the other end of the spectrum of things that you could control.
Yeah.
That you just didn't prepare well enough.
Right.
Like, you took it for granted. You took a shortcut. You half-assed it. You woke up, felt like, oh, I'm the shit, and I'm going to get this done regardless.
Right.
And because of it, life has this weird way of humbling you.
Right.
So, man, I can't even tell you how many of those opportunities that I've had, because how many of those losses that I've had, because I mean, you're all human beings. You can't be the machine every single day.
Right.
And when we lose, and the last loss that I can think of.
Because, like, just to add more to that, I've been able to find that, like, timing is so much. And like you talked about, you're going to lose sometimes, because another company or somebody else just had more to offer at the time. I've found, for example, I went to Penn State, obviously. Biggest football is a huge passion of mine. So every year from freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, I walked to the football building and I tried to work for the football team some way, somehow. I met certain assistant coaches and I met players on the team, and then they all, did what they could to kind of get my foot in the door, but it just didn't happen.
Sure.
Obviously, so I was at the school at the time that the scandal happened, the scandal not happened, but the scandal broke out about Jerry Sandusky, and the entire football staff was cleaned out for the first time in hundreds, like almost tens of years. So number one, if I had gotten that job opportunity, because I did end up getting a job opportunity my senior year, which is crazy. But if I had gotten that job opportunity any earlier, I would have, number one, lost my job. And number two, the amount of maturity that I needed to have that job, I did not have those first 3 years. And I was not equipped. So it was kind of like I needed to keep trying, and the opportunity that I got was way better than I ever imagined. It was just amazing that like the timing, the universe was just like, actually not ready, but don't give up.
Yeah. And just thinking about that, I have two of those learning opportunities, as you put it, one on a professional standpoint and one on a very personal one. From a professional standpoint, before I came on the Procore, I was working for a lighting and controls manufacturer out of Austin who had an office in New York City. Had an opportunity to basically build out the entirety of our construction wing of our business out in the Northeast, which meant dealing with Northeast contractors, dealing with that grind out there. And I did it pretty successfully. We went through a lot of metamorphosis, including playing with this weird construction software at some point or another.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, Procure or whatever.
Yeah.
I hear it's pretty good, big nowadays. Anyway, so we did that, and my boss came to me. He sold me the dream. It's like, hey, how about you come to Austin and lead all the project management, and then build this out for the entire company and make New York the model for how we do construction.
Right.
I was like, yeah, I mean, I get to come home. I'm close to the family. Let's do that. So I come to Austin, and the bill of goods sold and what I actually got were very different things. I did have an opportunity to build out the construction part of our business, but it was not anything that I expected. It was a lot of bureaucracy and red tape, and shit rolls downhill, and I was always at the foot of that hill of all things that we did within the business. Because as a lighting and control manufacturer, you not only do project execution, you also have to manage product and quality of product and client relations and marketing. So all of those things are things that would fall into my lap, because nobody wants to hear from the head of engineering when the $200 like light bulb, little A bulb that they bought is now going out 2 days after installation. They're going to go to the project manager who ran the job. It's like, dude, I paid a shit ton of money for this, and these really expensive, really cool light bulbs are no longer working. Like, what are you doing? It's like, I didn't build it. I just put the damn thing in. Like, my team just came in and put it in.
Right.
Like, it was perfect when we left.
Right.
And when you're so close to the client and so far away from the solution to the client, I can go and yell at engineers like, hey, the product that you built isn't working.
Yeah.
And they would say, yeah, we're working on it. And then like start responding to my text messages. But the client isn't. They're still very much yelling at me. So it was one of those situations where I was not put in a position to succeed.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of things that I couldn't control, and I was just getting beat up every day. And when I told them, like, hey, the very least that we could do is buy this software that I worked on with this other project, and it really helped us, like, that would help me immensely. And our CEO more or less said, hey, I don't pay you to, tell me about why things aren't working. I pay you to fix things. Yeah. And, that was one of those situations where I felt like that opportunity that I thought I was going to get ended up being an L. It's like, you took a pay cut, you moved out of New York City, you were seeing this great girl, and you decided that you wanted to go into Texas because you go back home to Texas because that's home. That ended up falling out. And like all of the stuff that you thought you were going to get out of this opportunity ended up being smoke.
Right.
And I made friends with this really cool person while I was there. Her name was Lauren Adez. And me and Desi were cool as hell. And then one day she just leaves and she goes to another company. It's like, damn, I'm gonna miss Desi. Um, 4 months later, it had to be like 4 months later. I'm frustrated with work, and like I'm just scrolling through Glassdoor, LinkedIn, all this stuff, and this ad for this company called Procore comes up. It's like, I've heard of these guys. Like I worked
Right.
with them
I worked
before.
it. Yeah.
And then I was like, let me learn a little bit more about this company. And I go on LinkedIn, I type in Procore, and who pops up? Sales development rep named Lauren Adez. And it's like, Desi, she works at this company. So I ended up texting the Dez. It's like, hey, tell me what you know about Procore, because I'm looking at the Glassdoor and it's got like 5 stars all over the place. People act like the fountains spit out gold, like it's the greatest place to ever exist.
Yeah.
And she immediately calls me and she's just like, do you want to work at Procore?
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm thinking about it, yeah. And she ended up being my reference to Procore. And a week later, I was getting my first interview with recruiting, and then
Cynthia?
2 months later,
was it Cynthia?
It was not Cynthia, I don't believe.
Oh, okay.
But and then like 2 months later after that, started my job as an SC. So putting the whole thing in perspective, that L that I thought I took with that cost, that bill of goods sold, not really being what I thought it was going to be, ended up being what catapulted me into what I feel like is my dream job.
Right.
That I would have otherwise never have known about.
Right.
So I took a lot from that. I took a lot from the idea of being in a position of leadership and really building off what that looks like on a day-to-day basis, and also being really grateful for leadership that listens to you. Like these things that I've pulled in my professional career. One thing that I've learned to be extremely important is that when I'm interviewing for jobs and interviewing for companies, they're also interviewing for me. Like, you need to convince me that this is a place that I want to work. And that's something that I learned from that transition that I take forward with me every day. So that was extremely beneficial for me on that part. Now, when it came to the personal piece, I'm gonna try to keep this one quickly and try not to like break down in tears right quick.
Right.
But this one comes back to the day that my grandma passed away, and I never want to put my grandma's life and her death in a perspective of, she worked this hard, she worked herself into the grave for me to be here, but that's a weight that I carry around. And she taught me a lot of lessons about, obviously being a student and being a student of being a student, which is a very different thing. And about what it means to prepare, and about what it means to have purpose, and to really carry yourself with the type of self-respect that makes other people, what demands respect from others. And so she taught me all these things, and it took a long time and a lot of therapy, highly recommend, to really get to this conclusion that, the last lesson my grandma needed to teach me, she needed to teach me after her life had passed. It's like, I can only take you 90% of the way.
Right.
That last 10% of you figuring out who the man you want to be is going to be completely up to you. By giving you the tools, I put you in that position to succeed. I gave you everything that I could. Now you make the rest of it, and you take that last 10% to become the type of father and the husband and person that you want to be going forward. But that lesson's up to you and what you do with that last 10%. So when my grandma passed away, it was just like, I have lost so much of myself. But what really happened is, like, now you have to gain the rest of who you are as a human being. You need to figure that out on your own. So that was one of those learning opportunities where I needed to learn to be a man for myself, and not just because of, not just having that safety network and always just go home and talk to my grandma.
Right. Gosh, man. I usually end these on a cheesy note. And I was going to do that here. I'm going to ask a different question.
Sure.
Because like the way you're speaking and everything, man, like I just, I see like, I just see a lot, I see a lot of what could be for the future. And when it is your time to go, because we all will go at some point, what do you hope your legacy will be remembered as?
Man, and you hit me hard there. That word legacy carries so much weight. It is something that I think about every single day on a micro level, with how my colleagues see me, and a macro level about how the world sees me. But the legacy, first and foremost, that I want to leave behind is the idea that what my children think of me as a father, and what my wife thinks of me as a husband. I'm not at that point in my life yet by any means. Like I'm very much still swiping on Tinder.
So holla at Darrius, if y'all see this.
So like, from that perspective, like my legacy starts there, and that's the most foundational piece of what they see me as. And I want to be considered as a warm person, as a guiding person who took all of those positive lessons that my grandma gave to me, and my mom and my dad gave to me once they brought me in, and applied that to my children without all of the unnecessary harshness that came along with it.
Yeah.
Right? I don't need to.
Do you think that's possible though? I'm sorry to cut you off, but like I toy with that all the time. Like, is that possible to give that lesson to our future children without giving them the traumatic experience as well that they had to go through?
Bruh, like when I talk about my grandma and this mystique of her as a person, like people create this idea of her as this infallible human and this angel human being. Like my grandma beat my ass on a regular basis. Like just she got to the point where she was giving me preemptive ass whoopings for things she considered to be possibilities of stuff that I would do in the future. And it was just like, that's just how she was raised. It's like the only way to keep these kids in line is to beat their ass.
Right.
And we had this weird paradigm shift in our relationship when I was about 16 or like 14 or 15, where it's like she stopped whooping my ass and started talking to me like I'm a maturing partial adult.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned more in that time between 14 and 18 as to the consequences of my actions than I ever got from just getting preemptive ass whooping. So I'm of the mindset where like you can't do that. Like it's hard,
right?
And one thing that nobody ever considers when you talk about things like spankings and any type of corporal punishment is that it's a method in which you use when you don't have any other resources.
Right.
And a part of why I work so hard is that I want to give my children the type of resources where I can be the best parent that I can be. Yeah. Where it's not like I'm working 16-hour days and 2 jobs, making minimum wage, and now I have to come home because you call some kid a dickhead at school, and now I got teachers calling me and all this other stuff. So I'm frustrated. So I'm gonna beat your ass because of it, because that's a lot easier than talking to you about why you shouldn't say that.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So I don't want to be in that position where that's my only option, where I can still be firm and still create boundaries, but also do it in a way that's not traumatizing my kids along the way.
Right.
That I don't feel like that is a necessary prerequisite to parenting.
Okay.
But yeah, and talking about the legacy piece, that's a part of it. It's like I want my children and my wife to feel like he was this extremely firm and decisive and infallible person when it came to his moral fiber, but at the same time, the most loving and empathetic human being that I've ever known. And I want a part of that to permeate between, how I work with my colleagues and any person who gets to know me. One of the things that I've been taught by a lot of my mentors is like, every time you get a person to reach out to you and wants to talk to you, consider how many people in your life gave you 30 minutes of their time. And what is that long-term impact? And every time someone talks to you or feels like they need some matter of guidance, you take a personal investment in them the same way that others took in you. Because that's a reverberating impact on people's lives. Like if you spend the time to help develop others, then they become people that can help develop others. It's passing on that empathy and that investment in a human being that allows people to elevate. So my legacy from that perspective is like, I want to be known as that person who is willing to carve out 30 minutes in their day when they're back to back on meetings. They're stressed out, they're in airports, but they cared so much about everybody else around them that they felt it was their moral imperative to help their fellow man. So that's what I want to be known about. And also a competitor. Like I pride myself on the way that I approach every single thing that I do. I like to win. There's very few things in life that feel better than winning. And, when people think about—
Surprising coming from a Cowboys fan.
Hey, relax. You're a Raiders fan. Let's get this one out. But anyway, when we talk about work, and it's like, people talk about my work ethic, which is also one of those things that I pride myself on. It's like, dude, like, how do you find the time of the day to be working this hard? It's like, this isn't working. This is winning. And what winning is a requirement. Requirement of winning is a prerequisite of continuing to do the things that put you in a position to win. And so when I'm spending hours working on projects or spending time with my hands in so many different pots, it is not me working. This is me preparing myself to win. And winners never get tired of winning. So I never get tired of doing my job. Like that's just how I roll, and that's what I want people to feel, and that confidence that I exude, because that can be infectious. It can be intimidating depending on the type of person that you are.
Right.
But if you approach that confidence with empathy, that allows people to take on your confidence in themselves and then really elevate their game. That's what I want my legacy to be. Like this person who's always tried to do more for others, so others can do more for those down the line.
Darrius, you got anything to plug, man?
Nothing personally to plug here. Just look out for your fellow person. Wear a fucking mask. Like that's not that big of a deal.
Nope.
You know, a lot going on in the world right now, and what we need more than anything is people to truly consider how this could impact other human beings. And if that's not in the front of your mind when you're making your decisions, if you're thinking solely about how this could possibly inconvenience me, doesn't matter if it's uncomfortable or something that makes you feel some type of way, just consider your inconvenience is someone else's life. So just kind of take that going forward.
The lasting message from my last 2 shows: wear a fucking mask, y'all. Wear a fucking mask, y'all. Thanks, Darrius.
Yeah, no problem, Ox. I appreciate you having me on, bro.
All right.